Hello, this is a recording of my confirmation Viva, which I did yesterday, thankfully passed. So I'm just going to record this basically for other people to know what my research is about, and also for myself in the future and to know what position I was at in October 2013. So I'll just go through it the way I did in front of the panel yesterday. Hello, my name is Andrew Malloy. I'm part of the Faculty of Art Design and Built Environment at the University of Ulster, and more particularly the School of Architecture. As you can see, the title of my research is The Structure of Spatial Experience and the Symbolic in Northern Ireland, with a subtitle of A Reflexive Cartography of the City of Belfast. That is a working subtitle. I'm not 100% happy with it, but it will become adjusted as I become more au fait with the language and as the research continues. So I'll just start off explaining the background to the research and why I am researching what I'm researching and why I enjoy talking about what I talk about. In my undergrad thesis and my master's thesis, I started to address the question, what is architecture? And with that, what do architects do? By the time I started writing my master's thesis, I realised that there are many answers to these questions, and inevitably you end up asking, what should architects do? And then you become embroiled in moral and ethical considerations, and maybe even get involved in the battle of the styles. I think that becomes very unhelpful and doesn't ultimately lead anywhere. Being a reader of Heidegger, I like his approach to philosophy and the way he tries to rephrase questions. He tries to transcend the problems, and I hope that there is a way to do this in architecture. I hope to transcend the questions I've been asking and to show that we're either asking them in the wrong way or not asking the correct questions at all. In my undergrad thesis, I started to see how the big paradigm shifts in science and sociology begin to affect the grand theories of architecture. We can see how modernism was affected by Einstein's theory of relativity and Freud's development of psychoanalysis. As we move forwards, we can see practitioners such as Peter Zumthor and Johannes Palassma starting to use the terminology of phenomenology to describe their work, but I think they missed a trick in that they don't really accept wholesale the potentially paradigm shifting opportunities within phenomenology, and use the terminology in quite a surface way. Again, if we move to more contemporary architectural theory, you can see ideas from hermeneutics coming into it, and also ideas from social neuroscience. But again, particularly in the two examples I've used here, the Snodgrass and Coyne book and the Francis Mulgrave book, they're used in quite a surface way, and again the potentially paradigm shifting fields aren't applied in a paradigm shifting way as far as architecture is concerned, and I think there's a gap in the theory here. And before I move forward to talk about the actual research itself, I'll talk about my methodology. I hope to develop this model based on these ideas from social neuroscience and phenomenology, which I'll talk about more later on. I then want to apply this theoretical model to a part of the architectural process. I have selected site appraisal, or the understanding of territory. I'll explain more later on why I chose that specific part of the process. I then want to explore and discuss these ideas using the city of Belfast as a case study, and again how I actually go about doing that I'll describe in depth later on. As far as the unique contribution is concerned, which is an important thing when it comes to PhDs, I do not believe that phenomenology, social neuroscience and reflexive sociology have been applied together with regards to architecture, and I believe that there is a big gap in the theory and there are opportunities here which could be explored. I also have encountered the artistic practice of mythogeography, which is an offshoot from psychogeography, and I don't believe this has ever been looked at in any sort of serious academic way, and I don't think, to my knowledge, it's ever been rigorously applied to architecture. I've also started to find out specific things about Belfast and its urban history and its development through research at PRONI, the Public Record Office of Northern Ireland. I've been finding stuff that I don't believe many people know about. It's quite a small part of the research, but I think it could be quite significant. So now I'll talk about the actual research itself. I've put a lot of work into developing a theoretical model. I will not discuss it in any great depth. I will talk about the sort of main upshots of the theory. If you want to know more, I have written 4 short booklets to accompany the Viva presentation. If you're watching this on YouTube, I'll put a link up in the description. If you're watching this on my website, the link should be obvious somewhere on the page that you're looking at. If you want to know more about the theory in particular, if you look at booklet 2, you'll find out exactly where these ideas come from, and you'll be able to read about the ideas in more detail. The model assumes Cartesian dualism as a starting point, because this is essentially the basis of Newtonian physics and the basis of the sort of common sense attitude to how reality works. The essential idea is that we are three-dimensional objects which exist in three-dimensional space with other three-dimensional objects, and we are in somehow special in that we're haunted with the angel in the head, or some sort of idea of the soul, which enables us to act and understand on these external three-dimensional objects. The main problem with Cartesian dualism is the idea of the mind as being an objectified thing which can be located somewhere, which is probably in our head. And I think this has caused us many problems, and a lot of the big architectural theories still assume this to be the common sense attitude to the world. So from Cartesian dualism, I then move towards the findings of social neuroscience, especially the writings of Antonio Damasio, whose work begins to collapse the difference between the mind and the body. Here we see one of Damasio's diagrams, which puts complex feelings and emotions into the same system as basic metabolic regulation. This is called the homeostatic tree, and it goes towards allowing us to build a body map for ourselves, which allows us to understand how we're getting on in the world and how we could tweak the world or change the world around us in order to either simply survive or in order to improve our quality of life. I've also been looking at the work of Ian McGilchrist, whose work begins to cancel the difference between emotion and reason, which were previously things which were pitched against each other, especially in Enlightenment thinking, which would have been where Descartes' mode of thinking would have been situated. Ian McGilchrist begins to resurrect the idea of the divided brain, the brain as divided between artistic thought and scientific thought, largely thought to be hokum. He reinstates it in a much more intelligent and less dichotic way. Here we see the hemispheres divided between abstraction, which could be described as the scientific mode of thinking, and contextualization, which is artistic. Abstraction being the removing of objects or facts or things from their context in order to examine them on their own, and contextualization is putting them back in their context and understanding the larger pattern. McGilchrist describes this as happening concurrently. We oscillate between abstraction and contextualization in order to form a rich and meaningful understanding of the world, which would then enrich the idea of Damasio's body map in order to improve quality of life and to direct our action upon the world. To these ideas I add social constructionism, particularly the work of John Searle. This is a diagram I produced of one of his ideas, which starts to describe levels of facts about reality. We have brute facts on one side, which are essentially physical reality, which lie in the domain of science and physics. We move up to institutional facts, which are things like the financial system and governments, things which human beings essentially created and invented, but things which we now rely on to survive. Then we have social facts, which are essentially social niceties which change from culture to culture and society to society. Things like not sneezing into your hand and trying to shake someone else's hand. Things which, if you don't comply to, you may be considered dysfunctional, but you can still survive in the world. And then we have opinions at the opposite end of brute facts, which are kind of self-explanatory, whether or not you like something or not, basically. Social constructionism, I believe, has a lot of difficulties in that it is the other side of the coin of Cartesian dualism, where Descartes' model assumed that all physical reality was entirely objective. This could possibly lead to the idea that all reality is purely subjective. This is to be watched. So therefore, to these ideas I add the ideas of reflexive sociology, particularly the work of Alvson Skolberg, whose work takes into account phenomenology and hermeneutics, and you can see this model here is essentially as advanced as my model has got. There's a lot of ideas in there. The main points are that we constantly oscillate between abstraction and contextualization, understanding and pre-understanding, conscious and unconscious thought. And this is the difference between relying on our reflexes and reflecting upon things, and we constantly do this at the same time and move between them. There is also this idea of the dissolution of the difference between subject and object, and that whenever we are describing something or representing it, we inevitably put a little piece of our own subjectivity into it, which is mirrored back at us, and we can never escape from this. So I'll talk of, hopefully that will become more clear. If you read text 2, there's a lot in there, and then as we move forwards to see how we apply it, hopefully that will become more clear, but it is a complex piece of theory. So to apply this to the architectural project, here we see the RIBA stages of work, and here we see how we can start to divide this up into a period of heightened reflexivity and a period of heightened reflection. The first 3 stages are the period of heightened reflexivity, the creative stage of creating the concept and the scheme design. And then the period of reflection is more to do with construction and the handling of budgets, etc. We can also see that there is only one mention of sight in the entire stage of work, and I believe this is a big oversight. I think that the understanding of sight, of territory, of the city, of the location of the building is very important on a sociological and urban point of view. So I believe that this is where my research is best placed. I think that there is a wealth of findings and a wealth of things to discuss with regards to the model as applied to the understanding of territory. So when we start to talk about the understanding of territory, we inevitably start to talk about cartography and mapping. This image I created, it's quite playful. It's based on Magritte's The Treachery of Images, and the text reads, "This is not the world." This is the main bullet point whenever it comes to applying the model, the theoretical model, to cartography. the map is not the territory. So to these ideas, whenever I started to bring them to Belfast, I started to experiment with psychogeography and the work of the situationists. For those who don't know about the work of the situationists, they were a sort of avant-garde French collective of artists and architects and designers, and they essentially thought that using various techniques of distraction or détournement, they could begin to strip out the sociological context of a place, which would lay bare some sort of objective sociological framework of the city on which all the citizens built their identities and their interpretations of their space. So my problem with this is that the model that I have developed suggests that there is no such thing as an objective sociological framework, and that if you strip out if you decontextualize the city, all you will be left with is root physical reality, which lies in the domain of science and physics. But regardless of the difficulties that I have with this approach, there are a lot of very, very interesting opportunities in psychogeography, and indeed the new field of mythogeography has came out of it. This is an artistic practice devised by an artist called Phil Smith, based on psychogeography, but he understands that you cannot decontextualize the city and then hope to understand it. You need to recontextualize it in some sort of new way in order to enrich understanding. So I'm going to show a short 1-minute excerpt from a film about mythogeography, which will hopefully enable me to better describe what mythogeography is and how it can be used in the research.
I want to revisit this map, this invasion map the Germans drew up. And the word to describe this yard on the map is Truppenlager, which means a kind of prison or detention camp. Now, I've investigated the history of this yard during the Second World War as best I can, and I can find no reference to this ever being used as a camp by the British authorities. And I started to become then suspicious of what this invasion map was about. And I began to think of the railway lines here, the chimneys, the ovens, and these walls. And I began to wonder whether this wasn't so much a description of what was already here, but a map of aspirations on the part of the invaders. So with that thought, let's now walk and leave the yard. And as you go, I want you to just be aware of your, what I would call your 30-minute ghosts or 40-minute ghosts. You pass through the people that you were 30 and 40 minutes ago. You might just sense the ghosts of the cattle, but also the ghosts of a past, which, thank God, never happened.
So hopefully you can start to see how Phil Smith uses the act of distraction, which I think in this case is being a tour guide, in order to put a piece, put a bit of objective distance between his tourists and the location that he is showing them around, and then using one very, very strange piece of information and applying his imagination and interpretation to that, then he can reframe a benign tourist spot as a concentration camp. So using these ideas, I indulged in a bit of psychogeographic drifting, where I found a quite unusual spot underneath the motorways in Belfast, which are two abandoned streets, abandoned because of the motorway flyover being built over the Lagan. You can still see the grain of the streets. You can still see the tiles of someone's porch, the floor tiles in someone's hallway, and I thought it was quite a strange place, and I created this connection between that place and the Giant's Ring in the south of Belfast, and I walked between them 2.5 hours and recorded the walk in various ways. And then I created this sort of mythogeographic narrative. I'm going to show you another short film, a film that I made, which begins to mythologize this walk between Tomb Street under the motorway and the Giant's Ring. The city of Belfast died at some point in the 90s. It is hard to pinpoint an actual date, time or location of death, but it has become increasingly clear to me in recent months that the citizens of this once great city, are scuttling around like a corpse. I decided to locate the city of Belfast and give it the funeral it deserves. My search took me far and wide, but under one of the grotesque infrastructural arms which feeds the mutation which has come to replace the city, I discovered something. This plot holds something, remnants of the old city long past. I decided to take a piece with me, so I might lay it to rest later on. I do not yet know where to inter the remains, but I hope, as I investigate the cause of death, to find a suitable resting place. As I journeyed through the city, I noticed the signs of life everywhere, as if the excavation of Tomb Street had in fact been an awakening. My previous cynicism now feels mean and out of place. The thoughts of another person, but then I was another person, in another place, another time. As I approached the dolmen, I'm reminded of the stones barring access to the forgotten junction where I started. These stones are the opposite, permitting access to the earth, to the past, and admittance to the future. The city we knew dies with each passing moment, and the city we know breathes again in the next. So hopefully you can begin to see how I mythologize not only the start and end point of the journey, but my own position in the city as a researcher, a cartographer, and a citizen of Belfast, and I begin to challenge my own notions and attitudes towards the city and modernism and the city's past, etc. And there's layers of meaning in there. There's lots of stuff that you may pick up on, you may not, you may misinterpret, you may not, you know. So it's all to do with layers of meanings and narratives and the mythology of the city. So next I'm going to discuss briefly the stuff that I've been looking at in Prony. I discovered this cache of letters from this man, Alfred Bromwell Thomas, who designed and oversaw the construction of Belfast City Hall, finished in 1908. Bromwell Thomas also wanted to design this building, which was the Royal Ulster Hotel, which, had it been built, would have been located between the Methodist Church in Donegal Square East, which is now the Ulster Bank, and the Red Stone Building, which is the Ocean Finance Company on the corner of Donegal Square East and Chichester Street. It would have been located on the site of what is today Imperial House. The letters concern Bromwell Thomas trying to lobby to get the building constructed. And there's letters from and to Lord Craigavon, the Prime Minister, the then Lord Mayor of Belfast, solicitors and various interested firms and individuals. And eventually, of course, the hotel was not built. Bromwell Thomas seemed to have annoyed somebody in City Hall. I think the Lord Mayor himself. I'm still to get to the bottom of these ideas, but it's a narrative which will contribute to this mythogeographic reflexive map of Belfast. Bromwell Thomas also had an idea for a grand civic plan for Belfast, which he announced in an address to the Rotary Club in 1925. This is a diagram I produced trying to highlight the main ideas of the plan. Essentially, Donegal Square would become the central square of a 3-square plan, with Chichester Street and Wellington Place becoming a grand avenue similar to Royal Avenue. At a best guess, one of the squares would have been located at Inst, with the Tech Building possibly forming one edge of the square, and the other square would have been at the Royal Courts of Justice. Another intriguing idea Thomas had was to locate the Northern Ireland Government buildings, which are now located in Stormont in East Belfast. He wanted to locate them in the city centre at the markets area, probably I would guess in the location of the present day Waterfront Hall. So I have been playing about with creating images like this, which are sort of more realistic representations possibly of Bromwell Thomas's plan. I could perhaps turn this into a physical model, I could turn it into a computer model, a computer walkthrough, a set of drawings, another film. I'm not sure exactly how I should represent it yet, but I think this could be a valuable contribution to the sort of qualitative mythogeographic map which I'm trying to produce. In addition to things like that, I've also organised a place walking tour which begins to discuss the ideas of mapping and how it has affected the history of Belfast. I also had a piece of work in an exhibition with some fellow PhD students in the university gallery, where I was experimenting with creating physical objects out of the GPS computer maps which I have been creating as I conduct my research. You can see one of them in booklet 4 of the text supplied. So these are just experiments of how I can begin to commodify the information and the research in order to allow other people to understand it, be they architectural practitioners, academics, or lay people. This is my Gantt chart. This is how I hope to achieve what I want to achieve over the next 2 years, which is laid out in roughly the same structure as my books, with the theory, the background, the action. Just then with the scope, which is what I've already done, and the conclusion, which will be the write-up period. Quite dull academic stuff, but it needs to be done. And then this is the final slide, which is a 5-minute film of me driving to the giant ring and driving back from the giant ring from various different viewpoints out of the car. And that's the end of the presentation. So the feedback was quite good. I seemed to provide them with a lot of information, and there were a lot of questions, which I took to be a good thing. They seemed to find it interesting. The biggest thing that was said was that the how I go about commodifying the map is important. The medium of the map, in some of the answers to my questions, I was talking about perhaps producing digital maps, maybe a phone app or a website. And the important thing is that I should maybe start attending conferences to find out about the sort of technology that's out there and the sort of things that people are already doing, because to some degree I'm reinventing the wheel, and a lot of that stuff is out there, and if I start to just investigate technologies and things like that and how to commodify it, I could then easily be sucked into the objectification of the technologies and not actually using them as a tool, but using them as a, just a medium for the sake of using the medium. So yes, it went very well. I'm very excited about doing the research. I think the first thing that I'm going to work on is the Bromwell Thomas stuff, and trying to think about how I go about actually representing that. I think it will probably become some sort of physical or computer model. I'd quite like to make a physical model, but I need to have a good think about exactly how I should go about making that. But yeah, I'm excited, looking forward to it. I think I'll just leave this video running. You can keep watching it if you want. But yes, that's me. Thank you very much for watching the video. Thank you very much for taking an interest in my research. Please keep an eye on my blog, which is passoverinsilence.blogspot.com, or indeed my website, which is www.ajmalloy.co.uk, and you'll be able to see a lot of my architectural and design work there, but it won't be updated as much as the research work, which is obviously ongoing. So thank you very much. Bye.